The place to be is living free in Tennessee.
Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Monday, June 9th, 2025, and it is episode 1046 of Living Free in Tennessee, and it's a Monday show. So we have a series of our weekly segments where I just update. These have been around for like 9 years, guys, so we're going to go through those as well as talk about a singular topic. And the thing that's on my mind today is about distraction and the hidden costs of what that distraction brings into your life. So we'll talk about that later in the show. Before we do any of this, though, I want to talk about our featured event of today's show, and that's June 29th. We have a meetup and rabbit processing demonstration at the homestead. It's from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. So it's going to go a lot like our meetup went this past weekend, where people get here around 1 and we have sort of a potluck style thing for an hour. And then Nighthawk and Tactical are going to demonstrate how to process rabbits. We've got, I don't know, 15 or 16, I think, maybe 12. I don't know. We got some bunnies that are going to be processed anyway. Usually when we process them, we process them for the meat, not to give to our dogs, like as food, our livestock guardian dogs, but they're actually going to take you through like how to eviscerate and parts them out and package them. We may end up selling a couple of those at the end of that. Not sure. People who want to do hands-on can try. Not everybody can, though, because there's a limited number of bunny rabbits. So we will be doing that June 29th. livingfreeintennessee.com to click on the event and sign up. So I know you're coming. The first 20 people who sign up get priority handling on, rabbit processing hands-on stuff. Okay, I also have two sponsors to thank today. The first one is DiscountMylarBags.com. Discount Mylar Bags is run by a dude named Toby. Toby, I met through another friend of mine who's a chef. And when I met him, he was still working at the Dollar General, sourcing things from China in bulk and passing on the savings to you. He took that superpower off on his own and created his own food storage and food processing store called Discount Mylar Bags. And it has turned into him to a full-time gig. So when you support Discount Mylar Bags, you're tapping into the value that he can bring. Plus, you also end up, supporting somebody who's following their passion, who's a member of our community, who's giving back to the community and helping you become more secure in your finances by not overspending on Mylar bags, but also by putting some thought into how you become prepared and what you store and how you size those things. He has some free resources over at Discount Mylar Bags. If you go over there, check on the right-hand side, you'll see it. Okay, sponsor number 2 is agorasttaxadvice.com. These two are a 1-2 punch. One, save money on your food storage systems and your food processing systems. And then 2, then you'll have a little extra money to start your side hustle or your business with. And if you're going to do that, then you should definitely work with somebody like Matthew Sursley of agorasttaxadvice.com. His specialization is analyzing where your money's coming from and how you're tracking things to see if you are structured the best way you can be to, legally avoid paying as many taxes as possible, keep more of your money in your pocket. Check them out. agorasttaxadvice.com. agorasttaxadvice.com/LFTN will give you a way to get some free downloads and resources for what you should be doing and thinking about as you're planning your business structure. Like how to take advantage of the tax code. You'll also end up on his email list, which is pretty awesome. He sends a very easy to understand and helpful email about every week. Not every single week, but just about every week. Pretty cool. agorasttaxadvice.com. With that, it's time for our first segment of today's show. I do have a note in that there's some sort of a signal glitch. I will say this. We have lightning and thunder outside, and I'm very sure that my computer won't get fried because I have an EMP shield installed on my house. Coupon code LFTN for $50 off yours. Anyway, but I decided just to go live as normal. This is not supposed to be a severe storm, but with lightning in the area, we can have internet outages. It looks clear to me right now, but if it isn't, then listen to the podcast, which you can download to your audio podcast player on your phone by searching Living Free in Tennessee on your phone. That gets you the audio podcast. You can subscribe to it. And then if you don't make the YouTube live stream, you totally, or in this case, it's the Rumble live stream. You totally can just listen to the audio podcast and anywhere, like working in your garden, on your unrealistically long commute to work that you're doing, so that you can earn money, so that you can save money, so that you can develop more independence in your life and eventually not have that commute, or any other reason that you need to listen to something for a long period of time. Okay, first segment is Tales from the Prepper Pantry. This is where we talk about storing what you use and using what you store. And I did my first attempt at a quote unquote country store. And this was me not letting the toolbox fallacy get in my way. So I don't have a lot of product to sell right now, except for hollow roast coffee. And, that's not exactly what you think when you think farm stand or country store. But I did have some pickled relish. I had dried herbs. I have lamb that we've raised here. I've got a couple of books I've written. I've got K-cups and coffee. And I also opened it up to anybody in the community who wanted to put anything in. Nobody did. But I have a feeling that will change over time. I'm hoping to get some soaps and other things like that are handmade here locally or in our network who mail them to me to sell. And if you're going to do that, don't just mail me stuff. Like, send me an email, Nicole@livingfreeintennessee.com, so we can work out how that's going to work. But I made the first attempt and we sold a little bit of stuff, which was kind of cool. I wasn't expecting to make a bunch of money. I just wanted to get the process started. The cool thing about it is, because I talked about it on the podcast last week, one of the people who came to the meetup has been running a free, not a free, but a honor system farm stand at the end of her driveway for a couple years. And she told me the good and the bad and the ugly about it, which is helping me formulate how we're going to move forward into becoming a hub for nutrient-dense food, handmade items for people in our community, and serving people in our community so they can get easier access to those things. And so it was fine. I need to build a building for this to really happen, or a stand, an actual physical stand, rather than put it up under Taj Mahal. But what I was able to do was put it under Taj Mahal. Tactical and I have been talking about just gutting the inside of the pump house, putting the door back in between the pump house and the other section of my pump house, and maybe making that the interim step, because we need to do that to the pump house anyway. And it's at the bottom of my driveway, and my gate that closes is going in on the to where you can still get into the pump house, but not into my house. So that may be what we do. We might build something special. We might have something at a different location, but definitely at every event, I'll at least put a shelf out with some things for sale. And then I'm starting to talk to people in the community who need to move more product. So they're organically raising vegetables. And then we've got people who can't seem to find or be able to afford organically, locally raised vegetables. And that's not true. If these two sets of people would just interact with each other business-wise, everything would be fine. So I want to do what I do best, which is connect. One of my superpowers is that I'm a connector, and figure out how we can facilitate those sorts of connections so that, y'all have access to awesome produce here and other farm-made items. A. Two, maybe you run across each other when we're doing stuff here, and that can spark relationships. And three, the farmers in the area have a way to make more money without spending a lot of time marketing their products. So that's a very local thing. And I know I have listeners all over the world. I am sharing this journey, not so that, you go, well, man, that'd be nice to have here. Well, maybe you will say, man, that would be nice to have here. And as we learn, I'm going to share it, like when we make a mistake, what the mistake is like, or what the consequence was, but also what's going well, so that hopefully you can use it as a model in your area as well. Because the more of us doing things like this and really working at connecting these dots, the better off everybody is in the community, as well as in our local community, as well as in our LFTN community. So that's the country store update. Canning season is officially launched. I have canned my first 3 jars of pickled beets, and I've got 2 or 3 more jars to pickle this week. So that's a crop that's just sort of eeping in. It's not happening all at once. I do like it when I can get, a case or 2, so 12 to 24 jars of beets in hand to pickle and just knock it all out. I call that canning palooza day. But at the same time, with what we've been doing, getting more active and getting out at other people's events and interacting with the community, as well as having more things here, it's actually kind of nice to just have a real simple single batch sort of thing. But 7 jars is the maximum that fits in my canner, and so 3 was kind of like a waste, but not a waste, because pickled beets are an integral part of what we like to eat here at lunchtime. We do a charcuterie platter about every day at 2 p.m. except for today we did it at 1:45 so I could get food before the show. And I put pickled things, home pickled things on there, home canned things, meats that we've made, like cured meats and other cured meats that we buy, and it's delicious. And then fresh vegetables from the garden. That's lunch at the Huller Homestead. So right now I'm filling up my pantry, right, by canning the extras, and then I'm using as much fresh vegetable as possible, just because I believe your ongoing health is eat as locally as you can reasonably, and if not, then as high quality as you can get wherever you are. And then also seasonally. So when things are in abundance, you eat them. And that may mean that you eat some things you don't usually eat as part of your diet. If you're a ketogenic eater and it's peach season, by all means have that peach. Maybe don't eat a whole batch of peaches because you'll end up with intestinal discomfort, but have an in-season peach. They're delicious. In fact, I should get my hands on some in-season peaches soon, because none of my peach trees are going to give me some. Although I heard there was 1 peach on 1 peach tree on this property. We didn't have the best peach year. That's all I'm saying. Okay. Dried herbs is one of the things we had for sale, and I wanted to throw this out. So I am producing an abundance of regeneratively raised herbs like oregano and basil and thyme and rosemary. I even have a rosemary plant alive. I know you guys have heard me kill hundreds of rosemary plants. And what I do is I collect them and dry them for my own use. I use them fresh. I freeze them fresh sometimes. Like fresh frozen basil is a great way to bring a more of a fresh basil flavor to a sauce, for example. And freeze dried is also very good. So with the amount of oregano in particular, I actually have enough I could sell it. And so I put some out in my sad attempt at a country store this weekend, and nobody there really bought any, and that's fine. There weren't a lot of people there, and a lot of them grow their own herbs anyway. And then I didn't have any, I hadn't put thought to packaging on this, but I'm thinking of setting it up so there's like a per scoop price for herbs that are dried. And then we have jars you can put it in, or you can put it in your own bags. So more like a bulk attempt, because I was like, well, I could buy like fancy high-end looking containers and sell those at a premium. These spices are at a premium. I picked them at peak ripeness. I dried them at room temperature. I then, have taken them off their stems and packaged them in a way to keep as much spice flavor as possible. But they're also regeneratively raised, which means what? No bug sprays, no organic bug sprays, actually. No fertilizers added, no anything except for natural growing methods and keeping the soil as healthy as possible, which hopefully bumps up their nutrient density, right, for you, and also bumps up their other benefits that some herbs have for your health. And oregano is something I have a lot of. So oregano is also supposed to be really good at helping you boost your immune system. Not that I'm making that medical claim, YouTube, but they use oregano oil for a lot of things. So something that's been interesting to me about that is that the regeneratively raised herbs have more of an impact. And so I don't know. I'm throwing this out there for y'all to just like send me an email, Nicole at livingfreeintennessee.com, or write a comment on the the show post at livingfreeintennessee.com, or like get hold of me in one of the communities and say, yeah, I was thinking this would be a cool way to package those. Because it's like I can get a bunch of spice jars and put them in there. I can put them in mason jars, but people who are tapping into that resource on the regular don't need a bunch of jars to throw away. And my motivation here isn't to just fill a landfill. But, I had them packaged in Ziploc baggies today, and that's also not exactly a premium look. So I don't know. I was kind of thinking of having some really nice jars that I source, and then, or maybe just mason jars, and then a scoop, and it's like certain amount per scoop out of a bigger container. And then you can buy your jar, like the jar with the stuff in it's one price. But then also you can refill your jar. And then if you forgot your jar to refill, there could be some little bags that you put them in and take it home and refill your jar. I don't know. That's my thought. Tell me what you think. Or if you have other ideas, let me know. Finally, so my broccoli season is over here, but one of my farmer friends had a bunch of broccoli, and he also has multicolored cauliflower, so like purple and orange, and I bought some of that this weekend. So we've been having funny colored sautés. And then also he had a bunch of broccoli. And what at this time of year in Tennessee, people have broccoli, and then they don't have broccoli because it's going to be way too hot and the broccoli is going to want to bolt. And so I left the farmer's market and I had like all of the beets I could get my hands on, so we get more pickled beets, because I'm like pickling my beets, but also farmer's market beets, so we have lots of beets. And I get to the car. Tactical was with me this week, and I was like, hey, here's my wallet. Go back, buy all the broccoli at that stand. And like we had an event this weekend, so I was like, can I? So I blanched it. And the way I blanched it is I brought a pot of water to a boil, threw the broccoli in after slicing it, pre-slicing it for storage, 3 minutes, boiled it, took it out into a cold water bath. They say use an ice bath. I didn't have ice to spare this weekend because I was saving it all for the event. And then I dried it off and froze it flat on cookie sheets, and that's now going into, I haven't done this yet, but it'll go into bags. So I will vacuum seal it in vacuum sealed bags, and then I have frozen broccoli for the winter that was, a day after it had been picked, instantly processed so that it's closer to the source so that it maintains nutrient density. I bring this up because if you are going to freeze broccoli, you need to blanch it for 3 minutes or it's weird. It's like green beans need to be blanched too, although I have been able to use green beans that weren't blanched. But what you're doing is deactivating an enzyme when you do that then makes it not super funkily or end up with a weird mouthfeel, or end up like with green beans. I hear people who don't freeze them end up with sticks that never get soft. That hasn't happened to me, but I've only frozen green beans once, and I reconstituted them in a crock pot by throwing them in with a stew, and they probably went for 24 hours. So maybe eventually they do get soft. I don't know. But the blanch time for broccoli is 3 minutes. And if you're looking at a vegetable wanting to freeze it, wondering if you can go look online, and they say what you do and don't need to. Like I have now an abundance of turnips, and I have some turnips in with my roast for tonight, but also I have extra turnips, and turnips store really well in cold storage. Like I could throw it in the prepper pantry and it'd be fine. But I decided that I want to sort of space these turnips out to be usable as a potato alternative in beef stew and that sort of thing. So I'm going to end up freezing some of them in sort of stew amounts, right? So that it's easy to just open the bag and throw it in. Well, to do that, I'm peeling them, and then I am cutting them up and freezing them, and that's it. And if you dry them flat, then they're not all stuck together in a clump, and that's super helpful. And then you can freeze them on trays and then take them off the trays, and then you can take out a handful at a time, or you can package them individually. And if you don't have time to do the tray thing, package them in the amount you think you're going to use, right? Otherwise, you end up with a big mass of turnips you can't use, or whatever, broccoli or whatever. That's why we freeze on trays if we can. But if we can't, the backup is smaller amounts at a time, or smaller bags, so that you are able to use them as you go. The turnips don't need to be blanched. Carrots don't need to be blanched. Broccoli, blanch. Green beans, blanch. Okra, I haven't had the blanch okra. What I do is slice it up, shake it in cornmeal, and then freeze it. And then it's just like fry straight out of that. Never had a problem with it. So bringing that to your attention if you're new to freezing things, because you actually can freeze things wrong. Who knew? If you fail at it, though, next year, and it's not the end of the world. Amy suggests dehydrate and use Toby from Discount Mylar bags to package easily for prolonged shelf life. Yeah, so I could produce these like Mylar bag packaged herbs, which would be really good for long-term storage because like how awful would that be? Like you have all this stored food and no salt and no herbs to go in it. So then you're just eating saltless yuck. That's why I actually, when I'm storing things for longer term, especially if it's freeze-dried stuff, I've taken to cooking it all the way. So it's just about reconstituting it. And I make sure that there's either salt in it or salt with it and that it's already spiced up. So it's not just like base product. If I am freeze-drying something just as part of my normal cycle and it's only probably going to be around a year or two, and I want raw ingredients, like I want just all tomato or just all onion or just all ground beef, green beef, that's not what I'm looking for, ground beef, then I will do that without the extra spices. But a lot of people have these prepper checklists for storing things, and they're having you store things you don't eat. That's why we have this section: store what you use what you store, find ways to replenish it naturally, and then you end up not having to worry so much about, I have 20-year shelf stable whatnot. I have a little bit of 20-year shelf stable whatnot, but it's whatnot that I eat. And what we don't store is a lot of rice and beans here because we don't eat rice and beans. And I'm not looking to just store random things that would make me sick, because beans make me very sick. And that's, it's an example of why you need to tailor things to your life. But also when you store what you use and use what you store, you end up creating a savings account buffer of supplies that if something else goes wrong in your life besides the zombie apocalypse, then you can tap into that. And when I went from working a 6-figure job suddenly to trying to make money with a podcast and on my homestead and other ways, like with Hollow Roast, it ended up being Hollow Roast Coffee. I didn't have to buy groceries for a year, really. I bought a few things here and there, like a thing of milk or whatever, but I didn't have to buy anything major because we already had it stored. And the things I was buying were things that were creating more food, with one exception. I did buy my half cow that year. We raised meat chickens that year, which we used to always do every year. We're about to catch up with chickens, and I'm going to buy a bunch of chickens from Hoff Grid Meats this year instead of raising, because I don't want to do a cycle of meat birds this year. But we'll get back into that. So Astatane says, I freeze-dried raw scrambled eggs with salt and pepper, and the bag didn't seal. Is it edible or just a dried item without the vacuum seal, similar to dehydrated foods? Did you put an O2 absorber in there? And has moisture gotten in there? Those are the two things to see. So it depends. If air has gotten access to it, it may have made that food go off. Because what will happen with freeze-dried food, if there's any air leak of any kind, it'll take the moisture from the air and sort of start reconstituting the food. And if you open it and it's sort of like a hard mass or it's sticking together, then it's a problem. So you're saying, no, it's just dehydrated. So it's probably fine. If you're looking for long-term storage, usually you put an O2 absorber in there to absorb any of the moisture that was just in the air that was just there. And that'll cause it to look vacuum sealed. If the seal has broken, then you have an issue. But I store my freeze-dried stuff in jars a lot that are not vacuum sealed jars. I can vacuum seal jars, but if I'm only storing it for a bit, I don't worry about it because I'm just reconstituting it again for whatever reason. You just can't store it as long. But if you have the O2 absorber in there, you don't necessarily have to vacuum seal it. And it makes sure all the moisture is out by absorbing that into the packet. And if you want to know how to size the packet for the size container you have, go to Discount Mylar Bags, because he has some explanation about that. So yeah, short-term fruits and things. Yeah, it's just like, I'm going to use them anyway. Even with milk, I freeze dry milk to use in my coffee or whatever when I'm hiking. And I don't want that sitting around too long, even if it is quote unquote shelf stable, because there's fats in that and the fats actually can go off even though it's freeze dried. So, yeah. Anyway, okay. Next up, we have the weekly shopping report from Joe, and he did it 2 weeks in a row. Yay, Joe! Thank you. So they started at Food City, and pet food is well stocked right now, so that's good. They hit the usual places. Next, stopping at Dollar Tree. The drink selection continues to change, although the shelves remain full. There's not a lot of Monster left, and I'm seeing a distressing number of zero sugar alternatives. This is somebody who likes his sugar. These typically contain liver toxins disguised as artificial sweeteners. Fortunately, I'm seeing a few choices made with cane sugar. They don't have caffeine, but I'm trying to cut down on that anyway. The tag in the store has been missing, but the online price of a 2x4x8 at Home Depot is $3.85. Aldi was our last stop. Other than my preferred chocolate, we found everything else we wanted. You know, Aldi has chocolate in stock and out of stock on a rotation that I do not understand, but you cannot count on them having anything specific, is what I've noticed. There have been a few more price changes since the last report. Bread was $1.39, eggs $2.96, which is down. Did you know that in 2019 somebody was really mad because my eggs were more than the 89-cent price tag at Aldi? So think about that. 89 cents. 5 or 6 years later, $2.96. And we wonder why the budget feels tight. Whole milk, $2.72. That's up. Heavy cream, $5.29. Uj was $4.25. Butter, $3.75. Bacon, $3.99. Potatoes, $3.49. That's down in cost. That's because the new crop is about to come on. And if they have the old crop left, they might as well sell them, right? Sugar, $3.29. Flour, $2.35. 80% ground beef is $4.69. Untainted regular gasoline is still $3.59. No frugality tip this week. And Margot, if I've missed one, let me know. Operation Independence. This is where we talk about building ongoing local revenue into our lives and also making wise choices to avoid the need to pay a guy. So what I mean by that is way back in the day, because I've done some electrical wiring, I had a breaker break in the middle of winter on my pump house. No water when that happens. And I went to the hardware store. Actually, I went to the local plumbing store in Smithville, Tennessee, and I got the proper breaker and I installed it myself down at the pump house. Had I had an electrician out to do that in the middle of a snowstorm, basically, it was like right after the ice storm, when electricians and plumbers were out dealing with the fact that people froze things they shouldn't have frozen, it would have probably cost me $190 to $290. And in order for me to do the repair myself, it cost me about an hour of time to go to the store, get the thing, and put the thing in. And at the time, I think it was an $80 item. So I got to put $200 in my independence fund. That was $200 I didn't have to earn, didn't have to pay taxes on, and I got a benefit. Now, had that whole thing taken me 4 days of time to save the $200, that's not a wise investment of time. But sometimes when you learn a skill, it can really help you. You know what I mean? So that was what I was talking about when I talk about the Independence Fund. And then we started Operation Independence because I was very reliant on income from one source for a long time. And I realized that if I want control of my life, I need to be able to make decisions for myself, which means I need to be in control of where my money comes from. And having a variety of local or community resources for money means if there's one failure, I can ramp up something else or, not be dependent on that one source of income, right? So this is what happened in Operation Independence this week. So one of the things we're working on is the Holler Hub project, which we've talked about a few times. And that event that we had Sunday was part of it. Well, I also have a glamper. And the glamper is something I use for business when I go out to events and can bring the camper to stay in. I stay in it sometimes, not all the time. But we also park it here and we house people who are speaking at events here, for example, in the glamper. And that means that we are able to, have a place with air conditioning and some amenities for people out here in the middle of nowhere without having them also in my house with me. And everybody gets their little bit of privacy. And as you all know, it's a privacy based community out here. We all kind of like our space in the holler. So I realized, in the in between times, why don't I generate some revenue from the Glamper? And that has always been the plan. Well, I was ready to launch the Glamper on Hip Camp and some other places and just have it available. And if people wanted to rent it, they rent it, right? And then whatever. And I didn't post it. And then a friend of mine came through and stayed overnight on his way through, Patrick. And I was like, oh, yeah, we can put you in the Glamper. And then you have like the cats. He's allergic to cats, I believe. So I was like, then my cats won't have like gotten dander and things. And that's really cool. And I went down there to just sort of vacuum it and make sure it was all in good order because I hadn't really done that since the workshop in April because nobody was in there. So why do it? But I was like, well, maybe I should do it. So I went down there to check things out and turned on the air conditioner. And I'm out there. I'm like organizing some stuff and putting new sheets on the bed and all the things you do when somebody's coming. And all of a sudden, battery system alarm goes off because that camper is also wired for solar. And it was overloading from the air conditioner, which is never done. And then it blew the breaker and then the alarm wouldn't go off until I unplugged it and the inverter went all the way down to 0 and then plugged it back in. And then I tried it again. Same thing happened. I'm like, literally, I was using this air conditioner 4 weeks ago. No problem. Well, here's the deal. Apparently, one of my grounding wires had shaken loose. And when I talked to Sean from Hack My Homestead, I was like, what do I do? I was like, I don't need an answer right away because I can put Patrick in my house with the air conditioner in my guest room, in the window. He'll be fine. But I actually do kind of want to get this rented from time to time. And he was like, you need to check every connection of every cord or like of the solar system and everything and just make sure nothing's shaken loose because campers move around and things can shake loose. I was like, okay, I haven't moved it, but sure, we'll do that. And I was really lucky Nighthawk had extra time. And I was like, start at the air conditioner because the only circuit that's causing this problem is the one that feeds the air conditioner. And then we'll go from the air conditioner back to the breaker board to check connections. And then ultimately this month we need to just double check all the connections and make sure nothing else, because that's what you do to maintain a solar system is make sure from time to time, make sure that your connections are all good and there's no weird corrosion or they haven't shaken loose for any reason. And he found it right away. I was stoked. So then I was able to use the Glamper, but had I had that for rent and then somebody rented it and then had that problem, that would have been a nightmare because when it's hot and humid in Tennessee, it's hot and humid in Tennessee. So what that means is we've put off under Operation Independence getting local ongoing revenue from our HIP camp until I can double check all those connections. And then it's going to be set up and we'll just do some temporary overnight stays for people coming through here. A lot of people will come through this area on the weekend to go do recreation in the area, but also we're about 8 miles off the freeway. And sometimes people are just like, I'm going to be in at 10, I'm going to sleep and I'm going to be out at 5. And you're like, okay, there it is. And it has air conditioning and there's an outdoor shower and there's an outhouse. So it's not actually set up for you to do all of those things in it. So, you don't get a ton of people with that without like a flushing toilet and stuff. But I have found that people just want to crash and leave on their way through on I-40 sometimes. And that works well for them. And, I can set it up so you're allowed to have a single night stay in the camper. If I'm doing a cabin, like on the weekend, you want at least 2 nights, if not 3. So that's a whole different topic for a whole different show. So next up, I want to talk about the main topic of today's show, which is the hidden cost of constant distraction. Here's what got me started on this. I have been, in the last year, you guys have seen me experiment with different ways to use social media to see if we can get more top of the funnel listeners to the Living Free in Tennessee podcast, because the more people who hear this message, the stronger our community becomes, the more people who opt out of having their life lived for them and they start building the life they want to live on their terms, whatever those terms are. If you want to live like me on a homestead, great. If you want to live in Manhattan, Sue, great, right? So I support your choice in the life you live. And taking control of that requires a mindset change before anything else. And then adhering to your big picture goals of how you want your life to be. And then when people judge you for living differently than they think you should live, then you have to develop that shield, right? Of, well, that's not your decision to make, but thank you, and move on with your life. Uh, so often we get stuck in our shoulda life where we live as we should live this way, even though we don't actually want to live this way. And that's what creates misery and moves us towards not fulfilling our core purpose, whatever our core purpose is. And everybody has a purpose. And when you find yours and start living it, it's amazing. And when you're not living your purpose, it does become rather painful. And your purpose can change over time, right? So I had all of the social media things on my phone, including TikTok. And I was making some headway in TikTok, but TikTok's never really taken off for me, just like YouTube hasn't. Like, I have a decent YouTube following of 4,000-ish people, but I'm not like a million followers. I've had some videos get 20,000-ish views, and that's cool. But, most of my videos get anywhere from 100 to 500 views. That's what we're looking at on YouTube. So YouTube's never been a big pipeline for me, even though I'm doing this show live on it. Where I get the most mileage is the audio podcast, because people download it to their phones. They can be hiking, they can be gardening, they can be working with their hands, building their business, they can be commuting somewhere, they can be whatever, put something in audio, and they are able to absorb this information that way. And the truth is, I'm not 100% sure how I get my audio listeners. I know that some of them hear me on other people's shows and start the podcast. Some people just search by topic and they find my podcast, and if they like it, they stick around. Sometimes y'all say, hey, listen to this episode of Living Free in Tennessee. I thought it was really good. Right? So I had that. And what would happen is I would upload the TikTok, and then I'd try to figure out how to answer comments or whatever. And I'd kind of get lost in the app. And then TikTok is really good at this. Something would catch my attention, and I'd have to watch that video, and then I'd have to watch this other funny video. And then I called it like research time so that I would learn how to make TikTok videos. And it took some time. And then guess what happened? It started eating my phone battery. And so I finally was like, I can't figure out why it's eating my phone battery. I just know that it is. And so I just deleted the whole app. And I haven't had TikTok on my phone in about 6 weeks. And my whole life got better. My whole life got better because I wasn't getting kind of sucked in for 15, 20, 25 minutes there, and then sucked into Instagram for 15, 20, 25 minutes here, and it made me hyper aware of how much distraction I had been allowing into my life from my cell phone. Right. And so I thought, you know what? Every major mistake I've made in the last couple of months, I can track. If I make a mistake on a hollow roast order, what I do is I just fix the mistake. And then I go from there back and try to figure out what I did wrong. I don't usually tell the customer what went wrong. If it was my fault, I just say it was my fault. I don't tell them why, unless they're like, hey, why'd that happen? Most people don't do that. If it was somebody else's who was helping me's fault, I still call it my fault. That's so because it's my fault for having set up a system that didn't work in that case, right? And so every major mistake has involved an interruption in the last 6 weeks. It was because the phone rang while I was packing coffee or whatever. Somebody came in and talked to me. And then I also started noticing when I'm getting, text messages and all of these things, I would have slower production time at Hollow Roast, or it would slow me down getting my show notes ready. Like today, to get my show notes ready took me 35 minutes. Now, sometimes it takes me 2 hours. It just depends on what I'm doing. But today's show notes should have taken about 35 minutes. And had I allowed and my phone was in the back, like across the room going ding, 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 ding. Had I been reading any of that, it would have taken me an hour and 35 minutes. So you see one of the hidden costs right out of the chute when you start backing off the distraction, right? And it's basically that it steals your time, and it takes you a little bit of time to reprogram your brain on a task when you're working on a task. And then if you're distracted, it takes you a second to look at that, and then you have to reprogram your brain. And so it really slows down your progress on stuff way more than you think it does. And people who say they can multitask are usually just able to quickly change from task to task. They're not really multitasking. They're just putting attention here and there. That being said, when I'm doing, I don't need to think about it, physical things, I can multitask by listening to something. So there's kind of a difference there for me. And if I really need to concentrate on the thing, like matching labels to coffee orders to packing slips, then I probably shouldn't be listening to something other than non-wordy things like classical music or something. So I did a test. I became hardcore about interruptions recently. And it includes leaving my phone far away from me when I'm doing certain things for hours at a time. Like literally a nuclear bomb could be headed for us and I wouldn't know because I'm not looking at anything. The only way I'd know is tactical would have to run across the yard and tell me, right? And then I also started setting alarms for benchmark tasks, by which I mean, if dinner's supposed to be at 6:25, I need to do something about dinner at 4. Sometimes the something is make sure that everything's ready to cook or there's a plan for it. Sometimes the thing is put the thing in the oven and then walk away. Sometimes, like usually I don't need to start actually physically cooking till later, but if we're going to have dinner at 6:30, I have to have by 4 latest decided what's for dinner and how it's going to be cooked. And if at 4, the question I'm answering is what's for dinner, then it's tacos almost every time, or it's something, or it's leftovers, or it's something fast, right? So that's what I mean by a benchmark task. And I have benchmark tasks throughout the day. Some of them are like the show notes need to be done by now. The show has to start at 2 today. And in order for that to happen, before that, the weekly email from Living Free in Tennessee has to go out announcing what we're doing this week. And in order for that to happen, I have to have thought about what's going to go in the mail. And if I'm releasing a recipe of the week, that has to be produced. If we're announcing an event, that has to be. So you just kind of back up. But if one of the benchmark things is let the ducks out at 9:30, that's not usually on my list. There's going to be an alarm for that so that I take a second and look. And in this way, I can concentrate. Now you're asking yourself, how did you do this without getting interrupted by notifications? Well, I have old phones. And you can take all your notifications and turn them off except for your alarm on an old phone, and it will give you an alarm without all the other notifications. And if you too have a phone graveyard, you have every tool you need for free to try this experiment. So I also set better boundaries. And the boundaries I set were related to people expecting immediate answers from me, coming through and just talking to me because, I work from home, so you can just come talk to me while I'm in the middle of working. No, you can't. As a result of this, I also separated myself from my phone at pretty much every evening by 9 at the latest, but often earlier. So I just stopped looking at it, put it across the room. It's not in my bedroom. As a result of this, I got better sleep. My health has improved, and I'm better able to focus on things when I'm doing them. The other result I got was I pissed people off and I hurt their feelings. And that second one is a core piece of why we allow ourselves to be distracted, because we don't want to piss people off and hurt their feelings. But do they have the right to tell us how to get our work done or how to do what we need to do every day? There's an interesting question wrapped up in that. So it's very clear to me that reducing distractions and interruptions is a really good way to get things done that you want to get done. But we still resist it. We have to have that phone as our leash, right? Like the other morning, Tactical sat down in his chair and I counted how many seconds it would take him from sitting down in his chair to pulling out his phone and looking at it. And the answer was 25. And I told him 25 seconds, dude. He's like, what? I'm like, it took you 25 seconds from sitting down to looking at your phone. Now, he uses his phone in a lot of different ways. So it doesn't necessarily mean he's looking at something distracting, because also your phone is your calendar. Your phone is your to-do list. Your phone is your, like it's all of these other things. But why do people find it so hard to make themselves not available for blocks of time? I started really drilling down on that. And I think the first one is fear of rejection. If you don't answer your friends right away or your loved ones, they might not be your friends anymore because they're expecting you to answer. A lot of things go back to fear of rejection in our little psyches. Another one is you've never learned to be alone and comfortable being alone in silence. And we're not really raised in society to be comfortable with that. You know, somebody who has to fill the space every time there's silence. If you're that person, I am talking to you right now. Learn to shut up. And learn to shut up for yourself, not only the people around you, but when you sit in silence, you start realizing things. You start seeing things you haven't seen before. You start smelling things you haven't seen, hearing things, right? Another reason people can't separate from the distraction is they're not actually following their purpose. They know they're not following their purpose, and they need to distract themselves from the reality, right? Right? And then another reason I thought of is trauma. When we experience trauma, we need to process it or other negative things. But it's not fun to process because you have to go to the bad place to get to the good place sometimes. And going to the bad place is painful. And if you've buffered yourself enough from the bad thing, then at least you're not hurting right now. And so you need that feeling and the endorphin rush from the phone or whatever is distracting you to avoid having to go to the bad place to process the thing so that you can leave it behind you and move on with your life. I'm sure there are also other reasons that people have. And I see, people, I'm looking in the comments right now, but there are other reasons that you may have personally. There are other reasons other people have. Those are just 4 big ones out of the chute. And that's me observing myself as well as other people. Okay. So this is kind of a very personal episode today. So then it hit me. After I went through all of that, it hit me that distractions aren't just digital. Boundary violators in our lives are distractions too, right? We all have encountered people who don't care a whit about your boundaries because what they need is more important than what you need to them. And this can look like a lot of things. It can look like somebody knowing that you go to bed at 9 and always calling you at 9:30 to talk and waking you up and expecting you'll answer the phone and then not getting mad, not being happy when you answer the phone. It can look like somebody interjecting themselves in places where they shouldn't be, right? There are people who just push beyond what is reasonable, demanding that you tell them why when you say no to something. Like, I understand wanting to know why when you say no, but if somebody's like, I just can't, or I just don't want to, no more why at that point. It's not or if they say none of your business, like no more why. You may wish to know why, but you don't get to know why because they are in control of the why. So people who push beyond what's reasonable are usually just more focused on themselves and don't really care about the people around them. They may think they care about it, but they may just be going through a temporary time of focused in, or they may be narcissistic, or they just like literally have made a decision. I'm more important than this person, and so they should cater to me for whatever reason. And we have reinforced those kinds of habits in structures that we put together where we do establish people as more important than other people. And, at a job, your boss should reasonably be able to expect you to be at work doing the things you're supposed to do for the job, right? But when you're not at the job, there's a boundary that could be violated by the same boss. People who seek to manipulate you when they realize you're not going to play along will come out of the woodwork, by the way, and distract you or try to interrupt you when they realize you're starting to set boundaries. Those people, not good. Amy's saying hypervigilance is part of PTSD. Yep. We have PTSD is a whole interesting thing. And I've been around a lot of people with it. And it's not, it sets up a foundation for codependence pretty easily. Right? So what happens next if you start setting boundaries? So if you have people in your life who are boundary pushers and you start setting boundaries, they get mad, they get hurt, and then they blame you. And they start with the character assaults, and they maybe throw a temper tantrum. They might, in order to get you back in their control, because they think they control you, they may manufacture a crisis you have to help them with. And there's so many more ways that they start showing themselves as people you need to be seriously considering if they belong in your life or not. I don't know if any of you have ever had somebody who manufactures crisis after crisis. You're like, literally, that was in your control. You didn't have to do the thing, right? That's something to pay attention to. And especially if every time you're talking to somebody, you're like cringy. What's going on here? They may be pushing boundaries that you don't even realize. So what about being available to your true friends and family, though? Like, how does this work with the whole distraction thing? The deal is this. If you need space to accomplish things in your life, then your true friends and your true family will not only understand that you need that space, they will give it to you. And not only that, they'll try to help you get it when they know you're struggling to get it. That's your true friends and true family. And you may be related to people who you call family who are not on board with that. If they won't do that, one of two things is true. One, you're not honoring your commitments to relationships by investing time to be with the people most important to you. And we've all done this. It's very easy to deprioritize time with somebody we know loves us unconditionally because they're going to love us unconditionally. And they may then start pushing your boundaries because they're like, hey, we haven't spent time being relationshipy, whatever that means, bonding in a while. And like, dude, I do want to give you your space to accomplish this thing, but also we're friends and need to go on a walk or whatever it is, or you're my husband and we need to husband wife or whatever. So that could be true. So it's something to look at, especially if it's somebody you consider a true friend who keeps poking. It's like, are they not telling me something, or they don't know they're not, they may not realize it. Have I not been honoring our friendship and spending time with the friend? The second thing it may be is that they are a toxic family member in your life, or they aren't a true friend. It's up to you to figure out which one it is. But the thing is this, you're building your life on your terms, fulfilling your purpose. And part of that hopefully involves honoring your friendships. But do you need to be constantly available and responsive? Or does that cut your legs off? Is it truly need to be responsive and be like interruptible because something big's going on? Like maybe your mom's in the hospital. That's a good time to allow yourself to be interrupted. Or is it your way to feel important? And what price are you paying by letting the distraction happen without end? I can tell you some prices I have seen people pay. I've seen marriages break up because people are allowing themselves to be interrupted by important stuff that's not really important, and it's taking their time away from the person they love the most. I have seen people not get enough sleep and hurt their health because they're allowing the phone to wake them up all night long. Sleep's pretty important, man. I have seen people not reach important deadlines and lose money and lose jobs because they're being interrupted. Bosses don't like it if you're constantly on your phone. But more importantly, I've seen people think that their boundaries aren't important. And that's the most damaging thing, is the psychological damage of allowing yourself to be abused like that. Even if the people texting you don't realize they are, because you never preserve space. So like most of the things we talk about here, it is in your control to fix this. right? It's your driver's seat control that fixes this issue. And it starts by deciding, when do I want to be interruptible and when do I not want to be interruptible? Because if you're just never interruptible, you'll never communicate with anybody. But if you have times that you can preserve and you communicate about it, that's great. And, like a trick I pull all the time when somebody like reaches out to me at the wrong time is, in SMS, you can program your reply to go to a specific day and time. And if I get something weird at like 11:30 at night and I just happen to be awake, which would be a very rare occurrence because I'm not usually awake at that time of night, and I'm like, I am like literally going to have to answer this one, but it's highly inappropriate that this business question has been asked of me at 11:30 at night, I'll program it to send it like 10 o'clock the next morning. So that it's like, oh, she got to work, then she looked at it, and then she sent the answer. That's training people where your boundaries are without saying, dude, don't send me text messages at 11:30. Now, if dude is sending you business text messages at 11:30 at night, and that's not okay with you, which that would qualify as outside my sphere of when I want to see things, then you do have to have the talk. But it does all go back to you. What are you giving up because you're constantly distracted? What are you not making progress on? What are you less efficient at? And what is that stealing time from that's more important from you? When you start looking at it that way, it starts becoming easier to say, I'm going to protect these times and I'm going to be open these times, but protect these times. Anyway, just some food for thought after removing a TikTok app from my phone. Don't forget the Hollow Roast pre-buy is live at hollowroast.com. Just go there and click on the coffee shop, and the first product allows you to buy gift cards. So you get coffee futures. It will be immediately delivered to your inbox, as well as some pretty cool digital products. Some of them from Paul Wheaton, Amy. No, Mona. Mona found me through Paul, then Jack, then me. Second thing is Self-Reliance Festival tickets are the cheapest they're going to be right now between now and Self-Reliance Festival, which is October 4th and 5th. It's only a few left at that price, and then they're going to the early bird price. Anyway, make sure you're on the newsletter list for updates and all things holler. We'll see you soon. Make it a great week.